Okay, so my journey to philosophy is, not quite as technical, probably, but my earliest memories of philosophy basically involve my friends and my family. I remember in the second grade, sitting around with my friends in the front yard talking about the color red, how we perceive the color red. And the big question was, do you see red? No, but okay, so we were sitting around on the front yard in the second grade asking, do you see red the same way that I see red? Or do we each see something different that we both call red? And that is actually able to work because we can't see what the other person is seeing. And we're both using red to consistently apply to the same color experience. So that was probably my earliest memory. And my son brought that up to me a couple of weeks ago, and totally on his own. So I think this is a young kid's, philosophical question. But anyway, to go further, my father did not go to college. He was self-educated. He was very intellectual. He always wanted to sort of, teach us algebra, in kindergarten, or, pick out all of the, Thomas Wolfe's and the, novels, and the Hemingway, and the, he was just a, really smart person. But I remember that he told me about Rene Descartes' cogito ergo sum, that I think before I am. I mean, I think therefore I am more than once in elementary school, and so Descartes, as you may remember, was able to call everything into question, including the existence of physical objects. But he realized that he was unable to call his own existence into question as long as he was thinking, as long as he was doing the thinking. So that was one thing that he could be certain of, that he exists as long as he is thinking. I think, therefore I am. And this just really impressed my dad. I mean, I just remember sort of growing up with, this idea. And then in the 11th grade, I remember talking with a friend about how we came to meet, me and this friend, what had to happen in order for us to meet at this moment. And so we started following the chain further and further back. What if you hadn't moved, to our school district? What if your dad hadn't got a new job here? What if your dad hadn't quit the job he had at the old place? What if? And we were going all the way back, and it just sort of dawned on me in a kind of almost, intuitive way, why bother? Why ask what if? It just sort of seemed like it all had to turn out exactly the way it did. And it couldn't have turned out any other way. And I think this was sort of my first intuitive determinist, taking a determinist position on the free will versus determinism debate. In the 8th grade, one of my friend's moms introduced me to Ayn Rand. So I read The Fountainhead, and I read Atlas Shrugged, and I read, several others. And for a while, I was a kind of staunch Ayn Randian until I got to my master's degree program, and a fellow graduate student told me she wasn't a very sophisticated philosopher. So, okay, so when I was for high school, I went to public schools. So there were no philosophy courses, in our schools, but the closest classes that we had to philosophy classes were literature classes. And I remember as a senior in high school, our British literature teacher asked us to define a good life. And she was putting our answers on the board as we were trying to think, what makes up a good life? How should one live? And there was a new girl at our school that everybody thought was really cool. And she raised her hand and she said, here are the elements of a good life. Food and shelter, having your physical needs met, someone to love, and meaningful work. And I just was blown away by that answer. And I don't think I've heard a better answer since. In high school, I also liked geometry class. I liked the process of constructing proofs. I liked the elegance, of the system. But when I went to college, one of my goals was to explore all the different had in high school. So I took economics and sociology and philosophy. And I was so excited when I went to college, and I was so excited to realize or to discover that others had taken the time to write down these kinds of philosophical thoughts in such a rigorous and systematic way. When I read John Locke on sense perception, it took me right back to my second grade conversation about red, how we see red. Every single one of those texts that we read would just seem sacred to me, that human beings had taken the time to pursue these seemingly unanswerable questions and write down, their best answers to them and try to support those answers. One of my first and favorite professors was a man named Dr. Gustafsson, with whom I had a course called Problems of Philosophy. And Dr. Gustafsson reminded me of the character Bert on the 1970s sitcom Soap. So for those of you who, were, born in this century, Soap was basically a sitcom that was a spoof on soap operas. And there was a rich family and a poor family. And Bert was the father of the poor family. And he thought that he had been abducted by aliens. And he thought that he could, make himself disappear at will. So whenever he would want to, disappear, he would like cross his arms and snap his fingers and go, "That's it, I'm gone." And then they would just, think he was invisible. And so Dr. Gustafsson reminded me a lot of him. And one day in class, Dr. Gustafsson was talking about Descartes after he had established his own existence, but before he knew anything else existed. And Dr. Gustafsson said, for all Descartes knew, he could be a brain in a vat on Alpha Centauri, kind of like the movie The Matrix. And Dr. Gustafsson said, brains and vats, vats and brains, I don't know. And I was just hooked from that moment on. I was hooked on philosophy with that one sentence. So I graduated from high school in 1982, and everyone was encouraged to go into computer science or, to go into IT. And I started with a major in psychology, but a psychology professor that I had said to the class that you had to have a PhD in psychology in order to do anything in the field at that time. And I knew there was no way I could afford to stay in school long enough to get a PhD. So I thought there's no sense in, pursuing this, this bachelor's degree in psychology. So I switched my major to fine arts because I wanted to go into graphic design, because I wanted to make music videos, because that was right when MTV had come out, and they wouldn't let me into graphic design till I had a portfolio. So I had to go into fine arts so I could get a portfolio together. But the first day I realized that the supplies were going to be way too expensive for me, because for one thing I had to buy, I wasn't that artistic really, so I didn't have supplies. So I had to buy the wash paints and, the charcoal, and then I was taking a photography class and I was going to have to buy a 35mm camera. So I was like, no, I have to switch my major again. So I switched out of that to like an associate's degree in animal health technology, which I liked the first year, which was very academic, but the second year was very hands-on with the animals. And I didn't like it. It wasn't what I thought. So finally, my friends from high school were starting to graduate from college, and I was falling behind. So I sat down and I asked myself, okay, so what subject did I like and what did I get good grades in? And it turned out that it was philosophy when I looked over my transcripts. And so I thought, I just have to get out of college. If I probably would have majored in philosophy at the beginning, but I didn't think I could get a job or make any money or, that kind of thing. But so finally I set to work on, the philosophy major in earnest. And I graduated from college after 7 years with a BA in philosophy. So then right after I graduated, with a BA in philosophy, another friend's mom told me about graduate school. I didn't even know about graduate school. And she told me that, how you can apply for a graduate assistantship or a fellowship. And that if you get one, the school will pay your tuition and, pay a small stipend for you to live on while you work on your graduate degree. So I thought, yes, this is for me. So I lived near Miami University of Ohio. And so I drove there and I went in person and I went and asked the administrative assistant, how I go about applying for their master's program. And while I was asking her that, one of the professors in the program walked into the office and he was just joking, but he said, oh, just let her in, and so I went ahead and, I applied and I did end up getting funding and, getting into the program. And then after that, I applied for the PhD program at Bowling Green State University in Ohio, up near Toledo. And I got funding and I got in there too. And so the rest is history. But I take the moral of my own story to be that you should follow your bliss. You know, like people are always like, do this, do that. You have to make money, but it's like, I mean, ultimately through all of it, I ended up doing what I probably would have wanted to do from the very beginning, but just thought I couldn't afford to. So.